All right, in other news, Russia and Ukraine are continuing their strikes despite the U.S. pulling out of the high-stakes peace negotiations. Russian drone strikes on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv have wounded almost 50 people, and Ukraine is now striking back. Its drone strike on the Russian port city of Novorossiysk injured at least 5 people. Ukrainian officials said fires broke out during the strikes in Kharkiv, damaging residential buildings, civilian infrastructure and cars. And according to local officials, at least 10 Russian attack drones hit the small Ukrainian town of Velevki in the early hours of Saturday. A shopping center, administrative building and residential buildings were also hit. Striking back, Ukraine shared video footage on social media showing the moment of its drone attack on a building in the Russian port city of Novorossiysk. A state of emergency was declared after the Ukrainian strike injured at least 5 people, including 2 children. Comes as the Ukrainian President Zelensky dismissed a 3-day truce ordered by the Russian leader Vladimir Putin, calling it theatrics, but said that Kiev is ready for a full ceasefire. Moscow said the truce, set to coincide with its World War II commemorations on 9th May, was aimed at testing Kiev's readiness for long-term peace and accused Zelensky of making a direct threat to the events on the holiday. Meanwhile, peace negotiations seem to be coming to a halt as Donald Trump withdraws the United States from formal ceasefire talks between Ukraine and Russia. The State Department announced that the U.S. will no longer indulge in shuttle diplomacy to bring the war between Ukraine and Russia to an end. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said that the Trump administration is changing the method of contributing to peace talks and will no longer fly around the world at the drop of a hat for meetings. And well, for more on this, we are now being joined by Ben Aris, founder and editor-in-chief of BNE in Telenews. Welcome to WION, Mr. Aris. First up, what kind of an impact will this have on the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia? And also talk to us about the challenges of Kiev and Moscow reaching any kind of agreement with the United States backing out of its mediator role.
Well, Trump said from the beginning that he wanted a quick end to the war. He said on several occasions, although there was no hard deadline, that he wanted to have a ceasefire deal in place by the end of April. So that's just passed. And in that sense, this is not unexpected. Trump offered about 2 weeks ago in London what he called his final deal. It was very Russia-friendly and basically conceded to most of Putin's demands. And he's asking for significant concessions, including that Ukraine and the rest of the world, including the States, recognize Crimea as Russian sovereign territory. And Zelensky has said from the outset that that's a no-go, that we're not going to concede sovereignty over our own territory. The other one, another red line for Zelensky, was that Putin was demanding all the sanctions be lifted from Russia, and not just the ones that have been imposed since 2022 when the war started, but all the way back to 2014 when they annexed Crimea. And both Zelensky and particularly the European Union, which have to come on board to agree for that to happen, have refused that. And so what we've seen is an impasse that both sides have been saying that they're willing to do an unconditional ceasefire 30 days, as the Americans suggested in the end of March. But there's been this impasse that Putin's been digging his heels in. He's been demanding these extremely difficult, extreme conditions. And we've got to the point where I think Zelensky has refused to do that. And so Trump's just thrown up his hands and he's walked away from the deal, as he always said that he would do. As far as what this means, then this means the war continues. It means that Ukraine will have to fight by itself, backed and funded by the EU. Having said that, the Trump side has softened their position quite dramatically recently. They just did a minerals deal And as part of that minerals deal, they restarted some modest arms deliveries from the States, which is something Trump has suggested he might not do. But still, we're only talking $50 million worth of arms. And so Ukraine and Zelensky are taking the gamble that they're now producing enough weapons of their own, and you're reporting that they're hitting Russia with drones, and Ukraine is now making 95%
Right.
of its own drones itself. So that it's going to do that. It's going to use the drones to continue the war against Russia and hit Russian targets.
Right, Mr. Harris, if you could perhaps just elaborate more on the United States of America's role in the ongoing war, because according to the statement that's come out of Washington, they've said that the U.S. Wants to be a part of the procedure, but not a middleman.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they were trying to bring the sides together. That Trump was saying, look, I'm going to force them in so much as, and he actually repeated it this morning. He said that if Putin doesn't agree to the 30-day ceasefire that was suggested in March, that he's going to up supplies to Ukraine. This has always been his threat in order to force Putin to the table. But they've been very actively doing this shuttle diplomacy in Riyadh, in various other capitals, and it's not going anywhere. Putin's not conceding on the conditions that he's demanding, and it's once in a lifetime opportunity for him, because if he can't persuade the Americans to lift those sanctions now, then they're likely to stay in place for a generation. And so you can see why Putin's digging in his heels, while he's trying to use his leverage over Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is doing very badly on the battlefield, in order to get Zelensky to make some concessions. But it seems now that Zelensky's refused. He's rejected the conditionality of the Trump deal. He just rejected the 3-day ceasefire that Putin was suggesting for next week, during the Victory Day parade. And that he's like, no, you have to come and talk to us unconditionally, and then we'll do negotiations, and then begin to deal with all these tricky topics like sovereignty.
Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Harris, for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us.